A poll in which 383 MPs took part suggests that a large majority, some 60%, will vote for continuing research, while 28% want it to be stopped. What's at the centre of this whole debate is the human value of a microscopic embryo, and whether research can be justified by the utilitarian argument that it could help avoid the passing on of genetic diseases to children. Peter Marshall reports.
The facts of David's life and the disease which will end it are almost too sad to contemplate. 18 months ago he seemed fine. He could walk, talk, play like any other child. Now much of that's gone. His decline has been quick.
I'll help David's hand. You hold this hand. I'll hold your hand.
His younger brother stands by as helpful and willing as a 4-year-old can be. Very soon David will be lost to him as a playmate. He won't be able to sit up straight or crawl or feed himself. Drawing breath will become an achievement and an ordeal. David is unlikely to live beyond the age of 12.
People who aren't in this position know nothing of the traumas. They know nothing of the screaming child that we have because he's frustrated he can't do things, the pain he suffers. And to hear your child lie there with tears rolling down his face saying, "Mummy, make it better," is absolutely agonising because there's nothing I can do. I have to sit and watch him die and make things as comfortable as possible in the interim. And this is why I would not put another child through this agony.
Every week, 2 boys are born with the worst form of muscular dystrophy. It's a fatal muscle wasting disease.
David and hundreds like him are sufferers from Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a genetic disorder affecting only boys.
What stage is this embryo?
I say so.
It's one of the conditions which can now be avoided through embryo research. By using in vitro fertilisation, the so-called test tube technique, the removal of a single cell from an embryo can determine its sex. Female embryos will be implanted in the mother, male embryos will not. For mothers who carry deficient genes, this means new hope of producing only healthy babies.
Up till now, all they've been able to do is to rear those children until they die, often very early on as babies, or, of course, go through termination of pregnancy. Now, I, for one, would much prefer not to terminate a pregnancy. I feel that that is morally quite difficult to justify in many cases. But as embryos are naturally lost, and as we all, many of us, use methods of contraception which destroy fertilized eggs all the time, I really see that society should have very little problem with embryo research, which is basically not destructive, but really creative and designed, after all, to enhance the quality of life.
But those opposed to such research and the Commons Bill say the ends do not justify the means.
The tradition of medicine has always been that in experimentation on human subjects, the well-being and the life of the subject must be protected. Now, in the bill before Parliament, what is being offered is the possibility of creating embryos specifically for research and destroying them in the process of scientific inquiry. That seems to me to be against the tradition of medicine.
Thus we have one of the ethical dilemmas of our time. Should the collection of cells which makes up an embryo in its first 14 days be subject to experimentation and deliberate destruction?
The reason why I think the thing is difficult is that the embryo both is in certain respects like a fully developed human being and in many respects isn't at all like it. It is like a fully developed human being because it has all the genes there. But on the other hand, we're talking about something which is the size of a pinhead, which has no nervous system, no consciousness. It's not the kind of human being you can make friends with. And people don't like the ambiguity. People want to say either that it's a fully fledged human being with a full right to life, or that it's just nothing. And the difficult truth is that it's somewhere between.
Twice a day, every day, John and Marianne Machin attempt to beat health into their children. It's the basic physiotherapy they need to ward off congestion of the lungs. For James and Helena are 8-year-old twins with cystic fibrosis, another genetic disorder. The Machins, however, are against embryo research. They say it devalues human life and the lives of children like theirs. The family are pinning their faith on breakthroughs yet to be made in traditional medicine. The twins' life expectancy is short, but their parents insist there's always hope.
When they were born, we were given to believe that it would probably be about 2 or 3 years. And then he did a little bit better, and perhaps it would be a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And now we don't know. It was teenager when they were about 6, and we just don't know now.
Even the pills they take, the Creon capsules to digest their food, that's an improvement since they've been born. Methods of physiotherapy, that's something new as well, more effective all the time, but it's slowly improving. The prognosis slowly gets better.
And we feel that more emphasis ought to go into treatment and cure, rather than identifying embryos just to get rid of them.
From Sue Gower, there's a different view. She feels the chance to discard an embryo is her one guarantee of a healthy baby.
I'd be talking about a cluster of cells, the egg at fertilisation, which, with my choice, would be discarded if it was found to be affected. But at no time would it be within my body, would it be part of me, and would it be given the opportunity to become a pregnancy.
You think it was the option that you'd choose?
It's the option that I would choose, and I don't see any difference than using the coil as a contraceptive. In both cases, an egg can be fertilised up to 14 days and then discarded because it's unable to implant in the womb.
If anybody's views on embryo research are to be heeded, it should surely be those of parents of children like David and James and Helena. The fact that their ideas can be diametrically opposed shows how difficult the choice will be for MPs as they vote on the matter on Monday.
Peter Marshall on the human impact of the debate on embryo research. Now to discuss the key principles that MPs will have to consider on Monday, I'm joined by Professor John Finnis of Oxford University and by Lady Warnock, author of the famous report on human fertilisation. Lady Warnock, in that report 6 years ago now, you recommended that research on embryos ought to be permitted up to 14 days. As far as the status of the embryo is concerned, why did you take the view and still hold the view that it can be used in that sort of way?
Well, I think you put it in a very good way, because we're not really disputing about the facts. We know that the embryo, after it gradually becomes fertilized, is a collection of cells which are undifferentiated. That is, we don't yet know which of them is going to form the placenta and which is going to form either one embryo or 2 or even 3 identical twins or triplets. So that's what this early embryo is, and the question is what value we have to attach to it, whether we ought, as the Duke of Norfolk said in the House of Lords, to treat it as just like a child, just like a grown-up person, just like a member of the House of Lords, he said, or whether we should differentiate between the value we attach to that cluster of cells and a developing fetus after 14 days. And the view of my committee, and my view, is that the 14-day cut-off is really a very important moment. We should not allow, in any circumstances, research after that time, because at that stage an individual human being begins to form, and the beginnings of a central nervous system starts, and an individual begins. But before that, there is no individual person, although, obviously, the embryo is human, it's alive, but it hasn't a life to live yet.
Is it your position, Professor Finnis, that you can't and shouldn't differentiate between the embryo and adults, as far as the respect we give them are concerned?
What we have is not a mere collection of cells, undifferentiated. It is a human being entirely differentiated from every other human being in the world, beginning its life. It's not simply a bundle of cells, and no attempt has been made by any serious biologist or philosopher to defend the theory that there's not just here a bundle of cells lying next to each other. This is a dynamic unity. It's you at the beginning of your life or some other person at the beginning of their life.
Does that mean, for example, that when a fetus spontaneously aborts, that should be regarded as a death?
It should be regarded as a loss, something that doesn't touch our feelings because we haven't yet had any human contact with it. Our feelings, formed by what we see, what we can touch, and so forth, lag behind what science has discovered in the last hundreds of years, which is that we have here a completely distinct individual human person.
But on the 14-day point, Lady Warnock, you say that on no account should anything be done after 14 days. But as time goes by, aren't scientists going to come along inevitably and say, if you just let us go up to 20 days, look at all the wonderful extra things we could do?
Well, I mean, they might want to do that, but I don't believe that they would, provided that the limit of 14 days is incorporated in the law on the face of the bill. Because if they wanted then to increase the number of days, and I don't think they would, they'd have to go through the whole business of getting it through Parliament again. I mean, up to now, no embryo has been kept going more than about 4 days. So 14 days is far longer than people actually want. But I must dispute one thing. I mean, I understood that we were not in dispute about the facts. But Professor Finnis said that an individual human life began at fertilisation. But that can't be quite right, I think, because we don't yet know whether an embryo will turn into a human life at all, or whether it'll turn into 2 or 3. It's very difficult, it seems to me, to think of the pre-14-day embryo as exactly like me or you or any other individual human being.
Isn't there going to be a major anomaly if Parliament passes a law saying that after 14 days the embryo, so to speak, is sacrosanct, but at the same time abortion is legal?
Well, there'll be more of an anomaly if Parliament passes a law totally to protect the pre-14-day embryo while still allowing abortion to take place. I mean, that would be extraordinary. But I think at that point the abortion issue is really very different from the research issue, because the intentions of those wishing to undertake research are quite different from the intentions of abortion. I mean, I think the abortion issue actually is quite separate. But the intention of those who want to carry out research procedures using human embryos are to increase the possibilities of infertile couples having children, and above all, as we saw in the film, to make it possible to prevent damaged children being born and instead to allow healthy children to be born.
What would you say, Professor Finnis, to the couple in the film, as Lady Warnock has just said, who felt that had they been able to make use of the benefits of research having flowing from the study of embryos, then they could have had a healthy child?
There are very many conditions for which there is no prospect of treatment or cure by the sorts of methods of research that are in question. There are a few which might possibly be assisted within the foreseeable future by methods of research which involve what we're talking about in the debate in Parliament on Monday, the destruction of embryos. But there's extraordinarily little evidence that any destructive research on human embryos prior to 14 days can yield anything other than a method of culling embryos, of destroying those that are found to be unfit. And to that, the reply was given by the other couple, the other suffering couple in your film. The ends of much of this research are, I think, admirable, but the means adopted, and I think Baroness Warnock is right, the intention involved is something that is radically new for our civilization to adopt, the intention to destroy, as a means, another human being. Almost everything, I'm afraid, that Lady Warnock said about the embryo was inaccurate. The embryos have been kept going for 9 or 10 days. They are entirely individual. If they twin, then there was one and it becomes 2. This is, in reality, a human individual. Scientists have been pressing for periods up to 50 days in this country at the same time as Baroness Warnock.
Let me ask Lady Warnock finally to reply to that basic point of principle. A new thing in human experience, the willing destruction of something that is human as a means to an end.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that the destruction of one embryo will permit other embryos to be born healthy. And I think that the nature of the pre-14-day embryo is such that its value is not identical with the value of a child or a fetus. I think we've got to recognise that this is a question of what value one attaches. I don't think we're really in dispute about the facts, how an embryo develops. My point, and the point of those who are in favour of research, is that we ought to attach a different value to that pre-14-day embryo from all the children who may in future be born. And finally, I would say that certainly I'd agree that there's no prospect of curing, at the moment, curing these genetic diseases. What we're aiming to do is to ensure that healthy children are born rather than children who suffer from these diseases when they die still in childhood and having suffered acutely up to that time when they die.
Well, we shall see how the MPs explore these issues on Monday. Thank you both very much indeed for being with us tonight. And that's all from Newsnight for tonight. But join us again if you can on Monday at our usual